to talk about is crossing frontiers, and in particular how companies such as Twitter and Spotify have expanded globally and how they're moving into those new markets. So we want to look at how and if they tailor their strategies to go global, and how brands, advertisers can leverage moments on these platforms to engage local audiences. To help us understand and to provide us key insights is a very top panel I have here. To my left, we have Katie Lamp, who is the Head of Sales Operations for EMA for Twitter. Then we have Ross Adams, who's the European Sales Director for Spotify. And obviously, I don't need to give any introduction to Spotify and Twitter, but next we have Maren, who is the CMO and partner for IMS. So just to give you a kind of intro as to what IMS do, they are a media and marketing company that partners with fast-moving businesses looking to expand into Latin America. So Twitter, Spotify, Foursquare, Netflix, Bein Sports are kind of their clients. So that gives you a flavor of where we are. We'll go for a few questions we've got, so we kind of prep the panel in preparation, but I'll be manically writing down questions as we go along because their answers are sure to give me some more questions to ask. And if you have any at the end, we'll at least have a minute for one or two questions. So if you've got any burning questions, throw your hands up. We'll try and get to you with a microphone. So I suppose the best place to start, in terms of expanding into these new markets and in particular into Latin America, what are the biggest challenges companies face, and you know, how do you deal with those? Who would like to go first? Ross, you look very keen there.
Yeah, always keen. I think it's really important to get, I mean, for Spotify's business especially, licensing the music is incredibly difficult. And making sure you get that local content because, you know, what we listen to in the West isn't necessarily what they listen to in LATAM, so you have to have all that local content, and making sure you have that is paramount. So.
And from a Twitter point of view, is that a similar situation for you guys?
Yeah, I think our biggest challenge has been scale and being able to provide localized support to our different markets. And I think it's easy to bucket Latin America or EMEA into a region, and underneath each of those regions are specific countries that require local case studies, local data. And so as Twitter, we've taken an approach to launch new markets, not only through our direct sales teams, but in some regions, relying heavily on sales partners to help us localize our approach. So we have partnered with IMS in Latin America, for example. We have partners in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and parts of EMEA as well, where they've helped us localize our approach.
And what sort of help is that, Maren?
Well, I think one of the challenges that we notice from a Latin America perspective is if you look at the region as a whole, Latin America is one of the fastest growing digital regions in the world, right? So the internet population is growing faster than anywhere in the world. Mobile penetration is at over 100%, again, higher than anywhere in the world. Social media penetration, 5 out of 10 of the most social, if you will, countries in the world are in Latin America. And so we see a tremendous opportunity, which is why companies such as Twitter, such as Spotify, Waze, Netflix are looking to Latin America as their next frontier of growth. And as Katie noted, one of the big nuances or challenges is you have Latin America as a whole with tremendous opportunity and tremendous potential, but every country is different, right? So something as basic or as obvious as, you know, in Brazil they speak Portuguese and then it's Spanish in the rest of the region. But also cultural nuances, legal challenges, financial difficulties that really require in-country presence and local knowledge. And that's something that IMS can bring to our partners with our 7 offices in 7 countries to help these partners understand how to take advantage of this dynamic.
And I suppose we talked about the difference between the countries, and Maren just touched on it there. Have you got kind of examples of how you guys have used that kind of experience and actually gone into these countries and it's been a success? Have you got some ideas of some campaigns you guys have been involved in Latin America?
For us, Latin America is a very new region, so we've only kind of recently launched there. And talking about the local nuances, you know, with Spotify, we've had some issues in certain countries with the likes of billing, IOs, and how they set those up, and the advice we've had has been fantastic, but the stuff you wouldn't know unless you get there. And it's really important you speak to local people, because unless you do, you're going to find you're going to launch and then you're going to start annoying people, and in sales, that's the last thing you kind of want to do. So.
For Twitter, in any new market, whether it's through a partner or direct, we lean heavily on agencies to help us scale and help us localize our approach. And we work with them very closely to, as soon as we're in market, start developing case studies, because that's really what's going to prove the value of Twitter and create buzz in the market for us.
And have there been any other kind of people you've seen, companies, brands, agencies who've gone into Latin America and actually kind of inspired you and you thought, actually, we could do something around that? Or has anything really impressed you in the Latin American market in that sense, in how they've expanded and how they've created a business sense there and a business model?
I think if we look at Waze, for example, which entered into Latin America last year, Waze now part of Google, they've had some interesting campaigns on their platform where, for example, this past year for Carnival, one of the local Brazilian governments decided to start a campaign where they are advising people. It wasn't a don't drink and drive campaign, but a public safety campaign. And they were able to use pins and banners on the platform to alert people on how to be safe and how to drive safely during Carnival. This is in Brazil, where every single taxi driver is using Waze to get around the city and the horrible traffic in Rio and Sao Paulo. No? We see companies like Netflix, which works with IMS as a media, they invest in media heavily, and they have localized content now, where if you see, in Mexico, they'll have kind of telenovelas available for local consumption. They're investing in developing local content. And certainly Spotify, when Spotify launched, had an Argentine playlist in Argentina. So really a combination of, sure, there are global trends, right? Music is a global sensation. There are global artists that we listen to. But being able to also tailor and take a local approach that integrates, I think is very important for these companies, these platforms to be successful in Latin America.
And that kind of brings us nicely onto the fact that pop culture tends to have a big buzz around your two particular platforms in the process. We look at the Oscars, we look at the selfie there, we look at the Grammys with Farrell's hat. And I suppose, how are kind of international advertisers taking advantage of these real-time marketing opportunities? Have you noticed a big rise in that? Have you seen people out there kind of, yes, we've really got to grips with that, we understand it, and actually this is making a difference to our business?
Through the kind of spikes in streaming data we had over the past year, we could start predicting what the winners were, and we 9 times out of 10 we pretty much got it right. So we did big parties beforehand, playlists of the winners. We worked with some of those winners as well to tweet out some stuff, and then post that we released some data on all the spikes we saw from the performances that happened at the Grammys. And then in Sweden we worked on sponsoring one of the awards, which was one of the Innovators Awards. And we had, rather than this being voted for by the judges, this was voted for by the public. So we created a Facebook app called Hugo and let the public kind of vote through that. And that was a winner. And it was all about innovation, Spotify and tech. So that's kind of where we work with those.
For Twitter, the Oscars specifically were huge for us. We had 3.3 billion impressions on tweets related to Oscars during that night. And we find that whether it's an entertainment event, a sporting event, that event is unfolding on Twitter. And we find that the savviest marketers are the ones that plan ahead to be in the moment. So they scenario plan they know who's up for an award, they know which teams are playing. And for example, in the Super Bowl, Oreo created a campaign where they had Oreos in both colors of the teams and sent out the tweet for the winning team. Adidas did the same thing when Andy Murray won Wimbledon. They had 2 different creatives ready for whether or not he won or he lost. And so we see that the savviest marketers are the ones that are preparing in advance to be in the moment for these massive events and conversations on Twitter.
And do you find that's a particular genre of brands? I mean, we mentioned Adidas, quite exciting, quite on the point, aren't they? Are there some brands that still don't get it? And in terms of, are you having to go out there and educate them as well? Is that a key part of, especially when you're trying to expand into these markets?
I think that education is an important part of any, not just an expansion into new markets, but of any ongoing advertising conversation that you have with the brand and with an agency. So IMS, what we do, our approach is to have dedicated teams for each of our partners, right? So that we know that we have very heavy, very deep and profound product knowledge, that with our local expertise, we can then bring an extra layer of education and approach so that the local brands and the local advertisers, even, for example, Coca-Cola, which is a global brand but certainly has local market strategy, can understand how to best take advantage of these platforms, how to best integrate them into a 360-degree digital strategy. So that for us is a very important combination, and education is a key piece into success in the market.
When we're educating clients, where we start with them is that you've got to listen. So listen to the conversations that are happening to what people are saying about your brand. And it doesn't have to be massive global events that you participate in. It could be everyday moments. And so listening, being prepared, and then eventually taking risks and taking the step to respond is the third step in that process.
And that's quite interesting because it's nice. We spoke briefly about the Grammys, we spoke briefly about the Oscars. Kind of other events or moments in time that have really kind of driven growth besides those to your platforms, and how have you kind of measured the success of those?
Yeah, we've had a few things, actually, some interesting ones in the early days at Spotify, which helped us grow. PR and press is a great way to get spikes and around sporting events and stuff when players are tweeting out playlists and tweeting out songs that they're training to. But one of the biggest spikes, actually, was we had 3 minutes on the news at 10 for the BBC in London. And we were testing. It was the first 3-4 months of launch. It was really quiet. We were getting about 200-300, maybe 2,000 users at the most joining a day, which wasn't quick enough for us. And then we had this 3 minutes on the news at 10 talking about Spotify and streaming, and we just opened up the invite system, and we managed to get almost like 100,000 overnight, and it just peaked from there on. So certain moments like that can really change your growth, future growth. Yeah, so.
We find that our growth comes from kind of 3 different channels for us. The first is by influencers, celebrities, athletes adopting the platform, because when they join Twitter, then their fans then have unfiltered access to them and what they're saying. The second channel for growth for us is Twitter and TV integration. So Twitter hashtags being used for the X Factor or MasterChef, or news programs putting @handles or hashtags on the air, or Twitter even being used as a voting mechanism drives usage and signups on the platform. And then the third bucket is through marketers and brands. So when marketers use hashtags or their usernames on their offline media, on their packaging, they're inviting users to come to Twitter and get more content from them, whether that's offers or rich media or behind-the-scenes looks. We find that a combination of all of those things has helped drive user growth for Twitter.
And I suppose we've got a huge event coming up in the summer, which obviously is the World Cup. In my eyes, one of the biggest events in the world. And are you doing anything? Are you seeing advertisers put a huge emphasis on doing stuff, particularly in Latin America and in that region? Have you seen any kind of big things happening there, or are you aware of anything good? Are you involved in anything that's happening there?
We're involved with a couple of things which I can't mention what brands they are. But I mentioned earlier about how music and sport is intrinsically linked, and I think it's brands that use platforms like a Twitter to tweet out the sports stars they're associated with. So whether it is just a basic training playlist or here's what I'm listening to gearing up in real time, some really interesting social currency that they're using right there. So we're working with a number of brands on some of the World Cup activities, and hopefully doing some stuff on the ground as well, so people can kind of experience the brand as well.
In Latin America, we see, 3 of our largest markets have qualified, right? Brazil, Mexico, Argentina are going to be there. It's going to be a very exciting time, especially given the social and mobile dynamics of the region. But even from a global perspective, what I find fascinating for advertisers as we approach the World Cup is the experience of, one, the real-time moment within, in the event, participating in the event. This is going to be the first time that all 12 stadiums within any World Cup experience have free Wi-Fi and free 4G data. And so if you think about tweeting or posting or communicating in the moment via mobile, it's going to be a phenomenal opportunity for advertisers to engage with participants at that time with all that passion and excitement. And at the same time, with the rise of the second screen, right? So mobile, as we're watching television, there's a tremendous opportunity as well around the World Cup. If you think about advertising within a football or soccer game, right? There's essentially 15 minutes of halftime. There are no programmed breaks otherwise. And so if you're just advertising on the television, you have a limited amount of time. If you think about how you can transfer that digital advertising opportunity to mobile, you have an opportunity to engage with the user, with the customer, throughout the entire 90 plus minutes of the game. And so it really opens up these possibilities for an enduring conversation, an enduring engagement that brands are really going to be able to capitalize on.
During the Oscars this year, we saw records smashed And the World Cup is the largest global event. And so we expect there to be a massive amount of conversation happening on Twitter. And to Maren's point, whether you're there in person on Wi-Fi or watching on television, the digital conversation and the public conversation is going to be happening on Twitter. And so there's a big opportunity for brands to integrate in with that global conversation, but also pay attention to what are the things that are relevant to the local audiences.
And it's not too late for brands to get involved still, and obviously we're only 6 months away, so you think there's still an opportunity? I mean, do you know of any, obviously you couldn't say with Spotify, but have you kind of looking forward to any brand activity that you know of from an advertising point of view? Have you seen any campaigns or heard of any that you think are going to really kind of change the scope of how we look at the digital landscape in LATAM during the World Cup?
We do, in LATAM, we definitely have a significant number of advertisers who have made commitments to World Cup advertising, and I do anticipate that many additional advertisers are going to be coming on board as they plan for their strategies around this event. So it's going to be an exciting time. I think that there are opportunities to, as Katie noted, to listen, to prepare in advance, and to be able to participate.
And I suppose kind of leading on from that, are there kind of any insights you'd like to give about how brands can succeed in Latin America and what the key kind of advice, the key points are for them to kind of actually make a success of moving into that market?
I think for us it's using the likes of IMS and working out what those local nuances are and what does work and what doesn't work is really, really important to us. I think we've chosen a different strategy for Spotify's launch there purely because it's a completely different market and we need to scale quickly. But we're talking to a completely different person. So that advice we've taken and we're trialing some stuff now. And when the Brazil launch comes up, we're going to try some quite interesting stuff. So hopefully it will be a very successful launch for us. So.
Yeah. My advice would be to get into the market. I think it's easy to look at Latin America and specifically Spanish-speaking Latin America as a region. But each country does require a localized approach with local data, local case studies. And so actually physically being there, hearing that, listening, gathering feedback was a really important part of our approach. The second thing that I would say is we've leaned heavily on agencies to help bring Twitter to their clients. They're the local experts, they're their clients' experts, and so they know better than anyone who's ready for your product, specifically for us, Twitter. And then the third is considering your options. So, if you have the resources to go direct, or if you want to leverage a sales partner, or go through acquisitions or partnerships, there are various ways that you can take a local approach.
Yeah, definitely the partners that we work with are looking to engage in the region at a local level. They understand the value of that. That's been very exciting for IMS. So to work with partners that understand that you have global advertisers that need to take a regional and a local approach, that you have local advertisers that within a region can be just as important to the partnership. We look at Foursquare that we just announced their partnership recently. They'll be coming into Latin America very soon with their advertising products. There's a lot of excitement right now about the region, and so learning together about how digital works and how it makes sense in each country, how it makes sense in Argentina, where there is a huge digital entrepreneurship and a passion for digital, versus a Mexico, which is one of the largest markets in the region, but perhaps is a little bit more conservative, and they want to plan well in advance. Understanding those differences is going to be very important.
And I suppose kind of leading on from that is, when you're thinking about that global expansion, we see these opportunities. Obviously, the World Cup is a great example for Brazil. But how do you, as a company, how do you evaluate where the next opportunity lies? What are the kind of key ingredients to discovering that?
I mean, from Spotify's angle, I think when we launch in a new market, we have to work with obviously the licensing and the labels. It's not as simple as looking at the population size and just launching there. We have to look at piracy and how big piracy is in a region, because Spotify, it created itself around piracy and solving kind of piracy. So if we can make it easier to access music and quicker than piracy, we've done a job. So, you look at the labels and they have their own roadmap of where would they like us to launch. You look at the opportunity where the music market has got most penetration. And there's so many different things you've got to consider, but it's not as simple as just picking a market and launching.
For us, so Twitter as a service is available globally. So anybody that has an email address can sign up for the platform and use it. That includes users and marketers. When we look at where to develop our commercial operations, we look at a mixture of usage and the size of the ad market. And depending on the region and its readiness to have commercial operations, we'll take one of three approaches: going directly, partnerships, or considering to service it through another office or a hub that we have.
Well, thank you very much. Let's give a big round of applause to our panel, to Katie, Ross, and Maren. Thank you.